One night, one drink, one kiss, and the phone became the witness. No one wanted. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's bar cast a harsh glow over the sticky wooden tables. But tonight, Sarah Chen didn't care about the ambiance. She gripped her whiskey glass with both hands, the amber liquid barely touched, her wedding ring catching the light like a accusatory beacon. 24 hours ago, she'd been Mrs. Sarah Chen, devoted wife of 8 years to Marcus, mother to 7-year-old Emma, and assistant manager at downtown Portland's Cascade Insurance. Now she was just Sarah, sitting alone in a dive bar on Southeast Division, her entire world crumbling around her like a house of cards in a windstorm. The door chimed as another patron entered, bringing with it the cool October air that carried the scent of rain-soaked leaves and the distant aroma of food trucks. Sarah glanced up reflexively, then did a double take. The man who'd just walked in didn't belong in Murphy's any more than a Ferrari belonged in a junkyard. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his dark hair meticulously styled, and even in the dim lighting, she could tell his watch cost more than her monthly salary. He moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to owning every room he entered. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, steel gray and haunted, carrying the same exhausted weight she'd been feeling all day. He scanned the nearly empty bar, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he approached the bartender, a grizzled man named Pete, who'd probably seen every kind of heartbreak walk through his doors. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing tales like this one. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Sarah turned back to her drink, but her attention kept drifting to the stranger. He'd ordered something expensive. She could tell by the way Pete had to reach for the top shelf, and now sat 3 stools away, staring into his glass with the same intensity she'd been giving hers. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the low murmur of the television broadcasting the late-night news and the occasional clink of glass against wood. Rough day. The question slipped out before Sarah could stop herself, her voice hoarse from the crying she'd done in her car before coming inside. The man looked up, and for a moment, she saw past the expensive exterior to something vulnerable underneath. You could say that. His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place, refined but not pretentious. You. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. My husband of 8 years decided to inform me today that he's been having an affair with his dental hygienist for the past 6 months. Apparently she understands him in ways I never could. She raised her glass in a mock toast. Here's to understanding. Jesus. The stranger's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry. Don't be. At least now I know why he kept insisting on going to Dr. Morrison for his cleanings, even after we moved across town. Sarah took a small sip of whiskey, wincing as it burned. What about you? Let me guess. Corporate takeover gone wrong, stock market crash, or maybe you just discovered your trust fund has conditions you can't meet. Instead of taking offense, the man smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. You think I'm rich? Honey, that suit costs more than my car payment, and my car isn't exactly a beater. Plus, you ordered what I'm pretty sure is 20-year-old scotch like it was tap water. Sarah gestured toward his drink. Either you're loaded or you're about to declare bankruptcy in style. Fair assessment. He extended his hand. I'm David Kim. Sarah Chen. She shook his hand, noting the calluses despite the manicured nails. So which is it, rich or bankrupt? David's smile turned rueful. Rich, unfortunately. And today I found out that the woman I've been seeing for 3 months, the one who claimed to love me for my brilliant mind and kind heart, has been recording our conversations and selling information about my company's merger plans to a competitor. Sarah winced. Ouch. Industrial espionage? Corporate espionage? Emotional manipulation? And a hefty lawsuit that'll probably drag on for months. David raised his glass. Here's to people who lie about their motivations. They clinked glasses, and Sarah felt an odd sense of camaraderie with this stranger. So what kind of company do you run? Let me guess, tech startup that's about to go public? Close. I'm the CEO of Cascade Development Group. We specialize in sustainable urban housing projects. David's expression grew thoughtful, though right now, I'm wondering if I should just sell everything and move to a cabin in the mountains. Sarah's eyes widened. Wait, Cascade Development? You're the David Kim? The one who's been all over the Portland Business Journal for the Affordable Housing Initiative? Guilty as charged. David looked embarrassed. Please don't tell me you're going to ask for a job. I've had enough people try to use me for one thing or another. Actually, I was going to say thank you. Sarah's voice grew serious. My daughter and I have been looking at your Riverside Commons project. It's the first place we've seen that might actually be affordable for a single mother on an insurance adjuster's salary. David blinked, clearly not expecting that response. You have a daughter, Emma. She's 7, loves soccer, and has strong opinions about everything from breakfast cereals to climate change. Despite her pain, Sarah couldn't help but smile when talking about her daughter. She's staying with my sister tonight while I process today's revelations. Smart kid? Brilliant. Sometimes I think she's smarter than both her parents combined. Sarah's expression darkened, which is why I can't let her see me fall apart over her father's midlife crisis. David nodded slowly. Kids have a way of seeing right through adult pretenses, don't they? Speaking from experience, I have a nephew, my sister's boy, 9 years old, and he once told me I smile different when I'm at work versus when I'm playing video games with him. David chuckled, called me out for being fake happy in front of his mom. Ouch, kids and their brutal honesty. Sarah found herself genuinely laughing for the first time in 24 hours. Emma once asked me why Daddy always looks at his phone when I'm talking to him. I didn't have a good answer then, and I sure don't now. Maybe because he didn't deserve to have someone as perceptive as you trying to communicate with him, David said quietly. Sarah looked at him sharply. That's either very sweet or a very smooth line. It's the truth. David met her gaze steadily. I've been in enough boardrooms to recognize when someone's being genuine versus when they're performing. You're not performing. Neither are you, which is, refreshing. Sarah studied his face. Don't take this the wrong way, but you don't talk like most rich guys I've met. Most rich guys you've met probably inherited their money or made it by stepping on people. I grew up in my parents' restaurant in Koreatown in Los Angeles. Worked every position from dishwasher to head waiter before I got a scholarship to USC. David's voice carried a hint of pride mixed with old pain. Money changes your circumstances, but if you're lucky, it doesn't change who you are inside. And if you're unlucky, you end up dating someone who sees dollar signs instead of a person. David's expression hardened briefly, then softened. Sorry, I don't usually dump my personal life on strangers in bars. Hey, I started it with the dental hygienist confession. Sarah signaled Pete for another round. Besides, sometimes strangers are the only ones who can handle the truth. Pete approached with fresh drinks, his weathered face showing decades of experience with late-night confessions. You two doing okay over here? Need any food to go with those drinks? Actually, yeah. Sarah realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. Do you have anything that resembles actual food? Best grilled cheese this side of the river, and my chili won't kill you, Pete replied with a grin. Though I can't promise it won't fight back. Grilled cheese sounds perfect, bye, Sarah said. Make it 2, David added. And Pete, thanks for not making a big deal about the, unusual clientele mix tonight. Pete chuckled. Son, I've been running this place for 32 years. I've seen senators sitting next to street musicians, CEOs crying over divorces, and homeless folks who turned out to be millionaires. Money don't mean much when your heart's broken. As Pete walked away, Sarah turned back to David. Okay, so I have to ask, what's a guy like you doing in a place like this? I mean, don't you have some exclusive club where rich people go to drown their sorrows in expensive liquor? I do, actually. The Metropolitan Club downtown. Leather chairs, crystal decanters, and conversations about quarterly profits. David's voice took on a mocking tone. But when Christina, that's the woman who betrayed me, when she texted me today to explain herself, She mentioned that she was celebrating her successful information gathering at the Met with her real boyfriend. She texted you? While she was there with the other guy. Sarah's voice rose in indignation. Oh, that's just cold. Apparently, she wanted to let me down easy and maintain our friendship for future business opportunities. David's laugh was bitter. So I drove around for 2 hours, ended up on Division Street and saw Murphy's. Figured the greasier and more anonymous the better. Good instincts. This place has seen more heartbreak than Dr. Phil's waiting room. Sarah paused as Pete delivered their sandwiches, the smell of melted butter and cheese making her stomach growl. So what happens now? With your company, I mean, if she really sold your merger information. David's expression grew serious as he bit into his sandwich. We'll survive. It'll cost us some advantages in the negotiation, but Cascade Development is solid. We've got projects lined up for the next 3 years. And our reputation for ethical building practices speaks for itself. He paused. It's more the personal betrayal that stings. I really thought she cared about me. How long were you together? 3 months, but it felt longer. She had this way of making me feel like I could tell her anything. David's voice grew quiet. I told her about my parents' restaurant failing during the 2008 recession, about how I worked 3 jobs to help them keep their house, about my fears that success might make me lose touch with where I came from. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. She used your vulnerabilities against you. Seems to be a theme lately. The more successful Cascade becomes, the more people see opportunities instead of relationships. David looked up at her. What about you? Any warning signs with your husband that you missed? Sarah considered the question while chewing thoughtfully. Looking back, yeah, plenty. He started working late more often about 8 months ago. Became defensive when I asked about his day. Started criticizing little things about me. My cooking, my hair, the way I loaded the dishwasher. She shook her head. Classic cheater behavior, but I kept making excuses for him. Why? Because admitting he was pulling away meant admitting our marriage was in trouble. And admitting our marriage was in trouble meant facing the possibility that Emma might grow up in a broken home like I did. Sarah's voice caught slightly. I swore she'd have what I didn't. 2 parents who loved each other and loved her. David reached over and briefly touched her hand. She has 1 parent who loves her more than anything in the world. Sometimes that's enough. Is it though? I work 45 hours a week. I'm looking at having to move because I can't afford our current rent on my salary alone. And now I have to explain to a 7-year-old why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. Sarah felt tears threatening again. How do I tell her that sometimes people stop loving each other? Maybe you don't tell her that, David said gently. Maybe you tell her that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that her father loves her, and you love her, and that will never change. Sarah looked at him with surprise. That's actually really good advice. Do you have kids? No, but I remember what it was like when my parents almost divorced during the restaurant crisis. I was 15, old enough to understand the finances, but young enough to blame myself. David's expression grew distant. My dad sat me down and explained that their problems were about adult things, money, stress, communication, but never about me. That even if they couldn't live together anymore, they would both always be my parents and always love me. Did they stay together? Yeah, barely. It took them 3 years to rebuild their relationship, but they did it. They've been married 37 years now. David smiled softly. They still work together at the new restaurant they opened 5 years ago. Mom still yells at Dad for over-seasoning the bulgogi, and he still brings her flowers every Friday. That's beautiful. Sarah felt a stab of envy mixed with hope. I don't think Marcus and I have that kind of foundation to rebuild on. Too much damage, too many lies. Then maybe you're both meant for something different, something better. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the food helping to absorb the alcohol and ease the sharp edges of their respective pain. The bar had grown quieter as the night deepened, leaving them in a bubble of intimate conversation that felt both strange and natural. Can I ask you something? Sarah said finally. Don't you have friends or family you could be talking to about this? I mean, not that I mind. This is actually the best conversation I've had in months, but you seem like the type who'd have a support system. David's smile was rueful. I have a business support system. People who want to network, who need favors, who see opportunities in my success. But friends. Real friends who knew me before I had money. He shook his head. Most of them got uncomfortable when my life changed. They started treating me differently, either like I owed them something or like I thought I was better than them. That sucks. It does. And my family lives in LA now. My parents moved back there when their Portland restaurant closed. My sister's got her own life, her own problems. David turned his glass slowly in his hands. Success can be isolating, especially when you achieve it quickly. How quickly are we talking? Cascade Development went from a one-man operation to a $50 million company in 4 years. David's voice carried a hint of amazement, as if he still couldn't quite believe it himself. I started with a single duplex renovation in Southeast Portland. Now we're building entire neighborhoods. Sarah whistled low. That's incredible. What changed? I figured out how to build affordable housing that developers actually wanted to invest in, and municipalities actually wanted to approve. It turns out if you can make sustainable, attractive housing profitable, everyone wins. David's enthusiasm broke through his melancholy. We use innovative materials, energy-efficient systems, and we work with communities instead of just bulldozing through them. Is that what the Riverside Commons project is? Community collaboration? Exactly. We spent 8 months just talking to residents of that neighborhood, finding out what they needed, what they wanted to preserve, what problems needed solving. David's eyes lit up. Emma would love the playground we're designing. It's got this climbing structure that looks like a salmon swimming upstream, and the swings are positioned so kids can watch the river while they play. Sarah felt her heart squeeze. She would love that. She's obsessed with salmon right now. Her second-grade class did a unit on the salmon life cycle, and now she gives me daily updates on fish populations in the Columbia River. Smart and environmentally conscious. You're raising her right. I'm trying. Sarah's voice grew quiet, though now I'm wondering what kind of example I set by staying in a marriage where I was clearly an afterthought. You set an example of someone who believes in commitment, who fights for the people she loves, and who puts her daughter's stability above her own comfort. Those aren't bad lessons. Sarah looked at him with surprise. You really believe that? I do. And I think Emma's going to be proud of having a mother who had the courage to leave when staying, would have taught her that love means accepting betrayal. For the first time since Marcus had dropped his bombshell, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. When did you get so wise about relationships? I thought you said you don't have much experience with them. I don't. But I have a lot of experience with people lying to me for money. The skills translate. David's smile was self-deprecating. Plus, my sister's a therapist. I've absorbed some insights through osmosis during family dinners. Your sister sounds smart. She is. She's also going to have a field day when I tell her about Christina. She never liked her. Said she was performing interest instead of actually being interested. David grimaced. I should have listened. Why didn't you? Because she was beautiful, charming, and seemed impressed by things that usually make people treat me like a walking wallet. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, remembered details about my childhood, even offered to help with charity events. David's voice turned bitter. Turns out she was just gathering material for her real job. Which was what, exactly? Industrial espionage sounds so James Bond. More like corporate consulting with a side of emotional manipulation. Her real boyfriend works for Meridian Development, our biggest competitor for the Riverside Commons project. She was feeding them information about our timeline, our budget, our community partnerships. David ran a hand through his hair. I showed her the preliminary designs, Sarah. I was so proud of the work we'd done. I wanted to share it with someone who I thought cared about me. Sarah felt a surge of anger on his behalf. That's horrible. I mean, stealing business secrets is bad enough. But pretending to care about someone to do it? That's sociopathic. The worst part is, I keep wondering what was real. Did she ever actually enjoy our conversations? Did any of those moments where she seemed to really see me actually happen? Or was she just that good of an actress? David's voice cracked slightly. How do you trust anyone again after something like that? Sarah reached over and took his hand without thinking. You start small. You trust someone to be honest about their grilled cheese preferences. Then maybe you trust them to listen without judgment when you need to vent about your terrible day. Then you see if they show up when they say they will, if they remember things that matter to you, if they act the same way when they have nothing to gain from you. David looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. Is that what you're doing? Starting small? I guess I am. Sarah realized she hadn't let go of his hand, and that she didn't want to. Though I'm starting from the opposite direction, I trusted someone completely, and he betrayed that trust. So now I have to learn how to trust again, but more carefully this time. We're quite a pair, aren't we? David's thumb traced over her knuckles, the woman who trusted too much, and the man who apparently didn't trust enough. What do you mean? I never told Christina I loved her, even after 3 months, even when she said it to me first. Something held me back. David's voice grew thoughtful. Maybe some part of me knew she wasn't being genuine. Or maybe some part of you knew you deserved someone who wouldn't need to be convinced to care about you. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. Trust your instincts, David. They brought you to Murphy's instead of some place where you might have run into her again. True. David glanced around the bar, which had emptied considerably. They also led me to the most honest conversation I've had in months. Sarah followed his gaze and noticed that Pete was wiping down tables, clearly preparing to close. What time is it? David checked his expensive watch. Almost 2 a.m. Pete's probably ready to kick us out. We should probably head home. But neither of them made any move to leave. Sarah, David's voice was hesitant. This might be the whiskey talking or the emotional vulnerability, or just the fact that you're the first person in months who's talked to me like I'm a regular human being instead of a business opportunity, but would you like to continue this conversation somewhere else? Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What did you have in mind? There's a 24-hour diner about 10 minutes from here. Excellent coffee, terrible fluorescent lighting, and enough background noise that we could keep talking without Pete giving us the evil eye. Sarah considered the offer. Going home meant facing her empty house, her daughter's toys scattered around the living room, and the bed she'd shared with Marcus for 8 years. Going to a diner with David meant extending an evening that had turned out to be surprisingly healing, continuing a conversation with someone who seemed to actually listen to her answers. Okay, she said finally, but I drive myself. I'm not getting into cars with strangers, no matter how excellent their grilled cheese recommendations are. David laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Fair enough, though technically we're not strangers anymore. We've shared our deepest relationship traumas and agreed that Pete makes a decent sandwich. True, that probably counts as second date territory in some cultures. Sarah blushed as soon as the words left her mouth. I mean, that came out wrong. I didn't mean to imply this was a date. We're both clearly dealing with relationship disasters, and I just meant, Sarah. David's voice was gentle. It's okay. I know what you meant. They paid their tabs, David leaving a generous tip despite Pete's protests, and walked out into the cool October night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the streetlights and the air smelling clean and fresh. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how intimate their conversation had been, how much she'd shared with this virtual stranger. The Sunrise Diner on Powell? David suggested, pointing east. I know it. See you there. Sarah headed toward her modest Honda Civic parked between a pickup truck and a motorcycle. Sarah? David called out as she reached her car. Yeah. Thank you. For tonight, I mean. For listening, for being real, for just being you. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, too. I was dreading going home to an empty house and my own thoughts. Maybe tonight doesn't have to end with either of us going home to our thoughts alone. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and unspoken questions. Sarah felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation, attraction, the thrill of genuine connection with someone new. "I'll see you at the diner," she said softly. The drive to Sunrise Diner took 12 minutes through mostly empty streets, giving Sarah time to think about what she was doing. 24 hours ago, she'd been a married woman whose biggest concern was whether Emma would remember to bring her soccer cleats home from practice. Now she was meeting a man she'd just met for late-night coffee, and for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. David was already seated in a corner booth when she arrived, 2 cups of coffee steaming on the formica table. The diner was exactly as advertised: harsh fluorescent lighting, worn vinyl seats, and the comforting bustle of late-night Portland workers grabbing food between shifts. "You ordered for me?" Sarah slid into the booth across from him. "Black coffee seemed like a safe bet for someone having the kind of day you've had, but I can get you something else if you want." "Black coffee is perfect." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, studying David's face in the unforgiving light. He looked tired but more relaxed than he had at Murphy's. His expensive suit jacket draped over the back of his seat, his tie loosened. "So, continued conversation. Where do we start?" "Well, we've covered betrayal, broken trust, and the challenges of single parenthood. We could move on to hopes, dreams, and what we want our lives to look like in 5 years. David's tone was light, but Sarah could hear the genuine curiosity underneath. That's a dangerous question to ask someone whose 5-year plan just exploded. Maybe that makes it the perfect time to ask. No old assumptions to get in the way. Sarah considered this, staring into her coffee. Okay, 5 years from now. Emma will be 12, probably taller than me and full of preteen attitude. I want her to feel secure, to know she's loved, to have a stable home where she can bring friends and be herself. And you? What do you want for yourself? That's the harder question. Sarah looked up at him. I've been defining myself as Marcus's wife and Emma's mother for so long. I'm not sure who Sarah is by herself anymore. What did you want before you got married? I wanted to travel. I had this dream of seeing every national park in the country, maybe writing a travel blog about hidden gems in small towns. Sarah's voice grew wistful. I wanted to learn photography, maybe take some cooking classes. I wanted to feel like I was expanding instead of just maintaining. What stopped you? Life, marriage, responsibilities, the practical need to have steady income and health insurance. Sarah shrugged. Marcus wasn't much of a traveler anyway. He liked routine, familiar places, predictable vacations. And now? Now, I'm 32 years old with a 7-year-old daughter and a job that barely pays the bills. Not exactly prime circumstances for wanderlust. But even as she said it, Sarah felt a spark of her old dreams stirring. David leaned forward. What if they could be? What do you mean? I mean, what if having less to lose meant having more freedom to take risks? What if starting over meant you could choose who you want to be, instead of who circumstances made you? Sarah stared at him. That's either very wise or very naive. Maybe both. But here's what I know. I've spent the last 4 years building a company based on the idea that just because something hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done better. Maybe the same applies to life. Easy to say when you have $50 million to cushion your risks. True. But you have something I don't. You know how to be happy with simple things. You talk about Emma's soccer games and salmon research projects like they're the most fascinating things in the world. You find genuine joy in a decent grilled cheese sandwich. David's voice grew intense. Do you know how rare that is? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. You're romanticizing my situation, David. Being broke isn't noble or character building. It's stressful and limiting and exhausting. I'm not romanticizing poverty. I'm saying you have something money can't buy, the ability to find meaning in everyday moments. That's not about being broke. That's about being present. And what about you? What do you want in 5 years? David was quiet for a long moment. I want to build something that matters. Not just profitable housing developments, but communities where people want to live, where kids like Emma can grow up feeling connected to their neighbors and their environment. He paused. And personally, I want to share it with someone who cares about the work itself, not just what it can provide for them. Someone who loves you for your brilliant mind and kind heart. Sarah's tone was gently teasing. Someone who loves me enough to tell me when I'm being an idiot, who challenges me to be better, who makes me laugh when I take myself too seriously. David met her eyes. Someone real. The intensity of his gaze made Sarah's pulse quicken. David, I know, we just met. We're both dealing with fresh betrayals and have no business even thinking about whatever this is. David's voice grew soft. But I can't remember the last time I felt this comfortable talking to someone. Me neither, Sarah admitted. Which is terrifying because my judgment about people is clearly questionable. What if it's not? What if your judgment about Marcus was actually pretty accurate? You knew something was wrong. You just chose to hope for the best instead of confronting the worst. Sarah considered this. And your judgment about Christina? I think part of me knew she was too good to be true. I just wanted so badly for someone to actually care about me that I ignored the warning signs. So what do we do with that insight? We pay attention this time. We take things slow. We trust our instincts instead of our hopes. David reached across the table and touched her hand again. And we see if this conversation still feels this natural in the harsh light of day. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we exchange phone numbers. Maybe meet for coffee in a few days. Somewhere with better lighting and no alcohol involved. See if we still like each other when we're not bonding over mutual betrayal. That sounds reasonable. Disappointingly reasonable? Sarah laughed. Maybe a little. My life has been so reasonable for so long. Part of me wants to do something completely impractical. Like what? Like kiss a stranger in a diner at 2 a.m. after the worst day of my life. The words were out before Sarah could stop them, and she felt her face burn with embarrassment. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that out loud. But David wasn't laughing at her. His expression had grown serious, intent. Sarah, I know. Terrible idea, rebound thinking. Emotional vulnerability, all the reasons why that would be a mistake. Sarah started to pull her hand away, but David held on gently. Actually, I was going to say that I've been thinking the same thing for the last hour. Sarah's breath caught. You have. I have. And you're right. It would probably be a mistake. We're both raw, both hurt, both not thinking clearly. David's thumb traced over her knuckles. But mistakes aren't always bad things. The diner suddenly felt too bright, too public, too full of potential witnesses to whatever was happening between them. Sarah was acutely aware of David's hand on hers, of the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and unexpected, of the warmth spreading through her chest and down into places that had felt cold for months. David, she whispered, we could go for a walk, he said quietly. Get some air, clear our heads, talk more. Where? There's a park a few blocks from here, Tom McCall Waterfront Park. It's safe, well lit, probably empty this time of night. Sarah knew she should say no, should go home to her empty house, her practical life, her sensible decisions. Should not go walking through Portland parks at 2 a.m. with a man she'd met 3 hours ago, no matter how much she'd enjoyed talking to him. Okay, she said instead. They paid for their coffee and walked out into the night again. The air had grown cooler, carrying the promise of more rain, and Sarah shivered slightly as they made their way toward the river. David walked close beside her but didn't try to take her hand, giving her space to change her mind, to come to her senses, to remember all the reasons why this was inadvisable. But as they reached the park and began walking along the paved path that followed the Willamette River, Sarah found she didn't want to come to her senses. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt fully present in her own life, acutely aware of every sensation, the cool air on her skin, the sound of water lapping against the dock, the warmth of David's presence beside her. It's beautiful out here, she said, looking out over the dark water toward the lights of downtown Portland. It is. I come here sometimes when I need to think. Usually during the day, though. David glanced at her. "How are you doing? Still glad you came." "Yeah, I am, which surprises me." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "I haven't done anything spontaneous in years, David. Haven't felt curious about someone new, haven't wanted to take risks, haven't felt—" "Felt what?" "Alive." The word came out as barely a whisper. "I haven't felt alive in so long." David stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and the crisp night air. "Sarah, I know this is crazy. I know we just met. I know I'm probably rebounding. I know this could be a huge mistake." Sarah's words came out in a rush. "But right now, in this moment, I don't care about any of that." "Neither do I," David said softly. And then he was kissing her, gentle at first, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Sarah didn't want to pull away. She wanted to lean into this moment, into the unexpected connection, into the feeling of being desired by someone who had listened to her, really listened, for hours. The kiss deepened, and Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for months behind practical considerations and reasonable expectations. This was what she'd been missing, not just physical intimacy, but the thrill of genuine attraction, the excitement of discovery, the simple pleasure of being kissed by someone who made her feel like she was worth pursuing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, David rested his forehead against hers. "Okay," he said unsteadily. "That was a mistake?" Sarah's voice was breathless. "Perfect." David's hands came up to cup her face. "Completely perfect and completely complicated." Sarah laughed softly. "Story of my life lately." "Mine too." David kissed her again. Briefer this time, but no less intense. "Sarah, I need you to know. This isn't just the whiskey or the late hour or the emotional vulnerability talking. I'm attracted to you. Really, genuinely attracted to you." "I'm attracted to you too," Sarah admitted, "which terrifies me because my track record with men I'm attracted to is apparently terrible. What if it's not? What if Marcus was the exception, not the rule? What if Christina was the exception for you too?" They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, both aware that they were balanced on the edge of something that could change everything or complicate everything or both. "I should probably go home," Sarah said finally, though she made no move to step away from him. "Probably," David agreed. "Emma will be back tomorrow, and you'll need to start figuring out next steps with Marcus. And you have a company to run and a lawsuit to deal with." "I do." Neither of them moved. "David?" "Yeah. I'm really glad I went to Murphy's tonight, and I'm really glad you did too." "So am I." David kissed her forehead gently. "Can I call you? Tomorrow, I mean. Or later today, technically." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Give me your number." They exchanged phones, typing in their contact information with the careful precision of two people who knew this simple act was somehow significant, somehow a commitment to seeing where this unexpected connection might lead. "There," Sarah said, handing his phone back. "Though I have to warn you. My phone is ancient and occasionally decides not to receive calls. I'll take my chances." David looked at her contact information. Sarah Chen, soccer mom and terrible judge of grilled cheese quality. Sarah looked at his entry in her phone. David Kim, CEO and surprisingly good listener. I put down my personal cell, not the business line. That number goes directly to me, not through assistants or secretaries. Good to know. Though I should probably mention that I work weird hours at the insurance office, and Emma has soccer practice Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and I'm generally not great at phone conversation when there are other people around. Noted. I'll work around your schedule. They began walking back toward the street, both reluctant to end an evening that had been unexpected in every possible way. When they reached their cars, parked under a streetlight that cast them in warm yellow light, David turned to her one more time. "Sarah, whatever happens next, tonight was. It was exactly what I needed. Someone real, someone honest, someone who made me remember that not everyone has ulterior motives. You too. You reminded me that not all men are lying, cheating assholes. Some of them are just complicated humans trying to figure things out like the rest of us. David smiled. Is that what I am? A complicated human? The most interesting kind. He kissed her one more time, soft and lingering. A promise of continued conversation and continued connection. Then Sarah got into her Honda and drove home through the empty streets of Portland, her phone containing a new contact, and her heart containing something she hadn't felt in years: hope. At home, her house felt different. Still empty, still full of reminders of her collapsed marriage, but also full of possibility. Sarah changed into pajamas, washed her face, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of her evening with David. The conversation, the laughter, the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. The kiss that had made her feel like she was waking up after months of sleepwalking through her life. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Made it home safely. Thank you for an unforgettable evening. Sweet dreams, Sarah. Sarah smiled as she typed back. Thank you too. For listening, for the conversation, for reminding me that life can still surprise me. Sleep well, David. His response came quickly. Looking forward to continuing this conversation in daylight. Coffee soon? I'd like that. Good, me too. Good night, Sarah Chen. Good night, David Kim. Sarah set her phone on the nightstand and closed her eyes. But sleep was a long time coming. Her mind kept returning to the evening, to David's voice across the table, to the warmth of his hand on hers, to the moment in the park when he'd kissed her, and she'd felt herself coming back to life. Tomorrow would bring complications, Emma's questions, Marcus's logistics, the practical realities of disentangling a marriage and building a new life as a single mother. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah Chen fell asleep looking forward to what came next. 3 days later, Sarah was elbow-deep in cardboard boxes and packing tape when her phone rang. Emma was at school. Marcus was at work, probably texting his dental hygienist, though Sarah had stopped caring about that particular detail. And she was systematically going through 8 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what to throw away entirely. Hello? She wedged the phone between her ear and shoulder, continuing to wrap dishes in newspaper. Sarah, it's David. Just the sound of his voice made her smile, and she paused in her packing to give him her full attention. Hi, how are you? Better than I was 3 days ago. How are you holding up? I'm okay, actually. Busy, overwhelmed, but okay. Sarah looked around at the chaos of her living room. I'm packing up the house. Marcus and I agreed that Emma and I would move out, find somewhere smaller and more affordable. How's Emma handling it? Better than I expected. I told her what you suggested, that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that both her parents love her and that won't change. She asked if she could decorate her new room however she wanted, and when I said yes, she seemed genuinely excited about the move. David's laugh was warm. Smart kid, making the best of a bad situation. She gets that from her mother, Sarah said dryly. What about you? How's the Christina aftermath? Legally complicated but manageable. My lawyers are handling the industrial espionage charges, and it looks like we'll be able to minimize the damage to the Riverside Commons project. Personally, David paused. Personally, I keep thinking about how much better off I am without someone who saw me as a business opportunity. Good. You deserve better than that. So do you. How are things with Marcus? Civil but cold. We're being very mature and reasonable about the whole thing, which somehow makes it worse than if we were screaming at each other. Sarah sat down on her couch, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He wants joint custody of Emma, which is fine. He wants to split our minimal assets 50-50, which is also fine. He's being so fair and rational about everything that I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe there isn't another shoe. Maybe he genuinely feels bad about how things ended and wants to do right by you and Emma. Maybe. Or maybe he's just eager to start his new life with hygienist Barbie and doesn't want any complications. Sarah's tone was bitter despite her efforts to stay neutral. Either way, you get to start fresh. That's not nothing. Sarah looked around at the boxes, at the life she was dismantling piece by piece. Starting fresh feels terrifying, David. I've been part of a couple for so long. I don't know how to be just me anymore. Want some company while you figure it out? Sarah's heart skipped. What do you mean? I mean, I'm standing outside your house with coffee and donuts, wondering if you'd like some help packing. Or if you'd prefer I leave you alone to process in peace, I'll understand either way. Sarah looked out her front window and saw David's sleek BMW parked at the curb. David himself leaning against it with 2 coffee cups and a pink bakery box. He was dressed casually today, jeans and a gray sweater that brought out his eyes, and looked somehow both confident and uncertain as he waited for her answer. You brought donuts? Sarah asked. Maple bars from Blue Star Donuts. Figured if I was going to show up unannounced, I should bring quality bribes. Sarah found herself laughing. That's either very sweet or mildly stalkerish. I prefer to think of it as romantic persistence, but if it's the latter, just say the word and I'll leave the donuts on your porch and drive away. Sarah looked around at her half-packed living room, at the evidence of her collapsed marriage scattered across every surface, at the overwhelming task of rebuilding her life from scratch. Then she looked back out the window at David, who was offering company and caffeine, and the simple kindness of not having to face this alone. Come in, she said, but I'm warning you, it's chaos in here. I like chaos. It's honest. 2 minutes later, David was standing in her living room, taking in the organized disaster with the eye of someone who understood complex projects. Okay, he said, setting the coffee and donuts on the only clear space on her coffee table. What's the system here? Keep, donate, trash. Sarah gestured to 3 different areas of the room. The keep pile is discouragingly small. The donate pile is embarrassingly large, and the trash pile is making me question my life choices. What about the boxes? Those are things I've already decided to keep but don't know where they're going yet, since I don't actually have a new place to live. Sarah's voice carried a hint of panic. I've been looking at apartments, but everything I can afford is either too small, too expensive, or too far from Emma's school. David picked up a coffee and handed it to her. What's your timeline? End of the month. So 3 weeks to find a place, pack everything, coordinate the move, and somehow maintain the illusion for Emma that this is all exciting adventure rather than complete upheaval. That's a lot. Yeah. Sarah sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling the weight of everything she had to accomplish. Sometimes I lie awake at night making lists of everything I need to do, and then I make lists of all the things that could go wrong, and then I lie there wondering if I'm completely insane for blowing up my safe, stable, boring life. David sat down beside her, careful not to invade her space but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Are you regretting leaving Marcus? No, Sarah said immediately. Never. Finding out about the affair was horrible, but in some ways it was also a relief. It gave me permission to admit that I'd been unhappy for a long time. She looked at David. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. Relationships end, Sarah. Sometimes dramatically, sometimes quietly, but when they're really over, they're over. The only terrible thing would be staying in something that wasn't working and teaching Emma that love means settling for less than you deserve. Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. When did you become so wise about marriage? When I started spending time with someone who made me think seriously about what I'd want one to look like someday. David's voice was quiet, his eyes serious as they met hers. Sarah's breath caught. David. I know it's too soon to talk about forever. I know we barely know each other. I know you're in the middle of a divorce. I know everything about this timing is terrible. David reached over and took her hand. But I also know that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for 3 days. I know that talking to you feels like coming home. I know that when I woke up this morning, the first thing I wanted to do was call you. I've been thinking about you too, Sarah admitted, which feels impossible and completely impractical and like maybe the universe has a sense of humor, bringing you into my life right when everything else is falling apart." David smiled. Maybe it's not falling apart. Maybe it's making room for something better. Sarah looked around at her boxed-up life, then back at David's face, open and hopeful and completely focused on her. "You really want to help me pack. I really want to help you with whatever you need. Packing, apartment hunting, moving, unpacking. Figuring out how to be happy as yourself instead of as half of a couple that wasn't working." David squeezed her hand gently. "If you want the help, that is. What's in it for you? More time with you. More conversations like the ones we had the other night. The chance to get to know Emma. If and when you're ready for that. The possibility that this thing between us might turn into something real and lasting and worth the terrible timing." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, for hidden agendas, for the too-good-to-be-true quality that had made Christina so appealing to him. But all she saw was genuine affection, patient interest, and the willingness to show up when showing up mattered. "Okay," she said finally, "but I should warn you, I'm a disaster right now. I cry at inappropriate times, I'm stressed about money, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, and I come with a 7-year-old who has strong opinions about everything from breakfast cereal to social justice. I like strong opinions, and I'm pretty good with stress, financial planning, and life transitions." David's smile was warm. "As for the crying, I have excellent shoulders for that purpose. Don't say I didn't warn you." But Sarah was smiling too, feeling the overwhelming task of rebuilding her life suddenly seem manageable with company. They spent the next 4 hours working through her possessions, David asking thoughtful questions about what she wanted to keep and why, helping her see the difference between things that mattered and things she was keeping out of habit. He was practical without being pushy, supportive without being patronizing, and somehow managed to make the emotionally fraught process of dismantling her marriage feel less like loss and more like liberation. "What about this?" David held up a framed photo of Sarah and Marcus at their wedding, both of them young and hopeful and completely ignorant of what the next 8 years would bring. Sarah looked at the picture for a long moment. "Trash," she said finally. "Emma has her own photos of her parents together. She doesn't need to see us pretending to be happier than we actually were." "Good call." David set the frame in the growing trash pile. "What about this?" He held up a cookbook titled Romantic Dinners for Two. "Definitely trash. I can't remember the last time Marcus and I had a romantic dinner." Sarah paused. "Actually, I can. It was our 5th anniversary 3 years ago. He spent the entire meal checking his phone. His loss. You don't even know if I can cook. I know you can appreciate a good grilled cheese, which suggests excellent taste in comfort food. The rest is teachable." David grinned. "Besides, I'm pretty good in the kitchen myself. Something about growing up in a restaurant." "You cook? I make a mean bulgogi, decent pasta, and pancakes that would make Emma forget all about whatever cereal she's currently obsessed with." Sarah felt a flutter of something warm and domestic at the thought of David cooking breakfast for her daughter. That's a dangerous level of attractiveness, David Kim. Just wait until you see me handle a moving truck. You're going to help me move too? Sarah, I'm going to help you with whatever you need for as long as you want my help. David's expression grew serious. I meant what I said. I'm all in here, completely, ridiculously, probably too soon all in. Sarah looked at him. This man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment when she needed to remember what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to be chosen not out of convenience or habit but out of genuine desire. 3 days ago, she would have said it was impossible to fall for someone so quickly. Now, surrounded by the debris of her old life and the possibility of something entirely new, she was beginning to think impossible might be overrated. I need to pick Emma up from school in an hour, she said. Okay. She's going to ask questions about who you are and why you're here. What do you want to tell her? Sarah considered this. The truth, I think. That you're someone I met who's helping me pack because you're kind and I could use a friend right now. And if she asks if we're dating, Are we dating? Sarah's heart pounded as she asked the question. I'd like to be, if you want that too. If you're ready for that, even with everything else going on. Sarah thought about all the reasons why dating anyone right now was a terrible idea. She was getting divorced, moving, dealing with single parenthood, barely keeping her financial head above water. She had no business getting involved with anyone, especially someone as complicated and successful as David. But she also thought about how much lighter her impossible task had felt with David's company, how much clearer her decisions had become with his perspective, how much more hopeful her future looked with his presence in it. I think I'd like that too, she said quietly. David's smile was radiant. Yeah, but we take it slow, okay? I need to figure out how to be a single mother and how to be myself again before I can figure out how to be part of something new. As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere. Sarah looked around at her half-packed living room, at the evidence of David's afternoon of help, at the future that suddenly seemed full of possibility instead of just uncertainty. In that case, she said, would you like to meet Emma? An hour later, Sarah waited in the school pickup line with David in the passenger seat of her Honda, both of them nervous in entirely different ways. Sarah was worried about Emma's reaction to suddenly finding a strange man in their lives, while David was clearly anxious about making a good impression on someone whose opinion mattered enormously to Sarah. She's going to interrogate you, Sarah warned. 7-year-olds have no filter and infinite curiosity. Good. I prefer directness to politeness. Famous last words. Sarah spotted Emma emerging from the school building, her dark hair in slightly messy pigtails, her backpack almost as big as she was, her face lighting up when she saw Sarah's car. Emma climbed into the back seat and immediately noticed David. Hi, she said with the straightforward friendliness of children. I'm Emma. Who are you? I'm David, David replied, turning in his seat to face her. I'm a friend of your mom's. Are you her boyfriend? Emma asked with typical 7-year-old bluntness. Sarah felt her face burn. Emma, that's not… It's okay, David said calmly. That's a fair question, Emma. Your mom and I are friends right now, and we're getting to know each other to see if we might want to be more than friends someday. What do you think about that? Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge evaluating evidence. Are you nice to my mom? I try to be. Being nice to people I care about is important to me. Do you like kids? I do. I have a nephew who's 9, and he's one of my favorite people. Do you know anything about soccer? David glanced at Sarah, who shrugged with amusement. Some. I played in high school, though I wasn't very good. I know more about building playgrounds than playing sports, though. Emma's eyes widened with interest. You build playgrounds? Sometimes. I design buildings in neighborhoods, and playgrounds are part of that. In fact, there's one I'm working on that has a climbing structure shaped like a salmon. A salmon? Really? Emma's excitement was palpable. Mom, did you hear that? He builds salmon playgrounds. I heard, sweetie. Sarah met David's eyes in the rearview mirror, and his expression of amused delight made her heart squeeze. Can I see pictures? Emma asked. If your mom says it's okay, I can show you the designs sometime. They're still just drawings right now, but construction starts next month. Mom, can he, please? Emma turned to Sarah with pleading eyes. We'll see, Em. David's very busy with work. Actually, I'd love to show Emma the designs, David said. And if she wants, maybe she could give me some input on what kinds of things kids like in playgrounds. I could use a 7-year-old consultant. Emma's entire face lit up. I could be a consultant? Like a real job? Like a real job, David confirmed. Though I should mention that consultants sometimes have to give difficult feedback if the design isn't working. I'm very good at difficult feedback, Emma said solemnly. I told my teacher that her math worksheets were too easy, and she needed to make them more challenging. David laughed. I can see why you and your mom are such a good team. For the rest of the drive home, Emma peppered David with questions about buildings, playgrounds, and his nephew, while Sarah listened to David's patient, thoughtful answers and felt something warm and hopeful expanding in her chest. This was how it should feel, she realized, easy, natural, like puzzle pieces that fit together without forcing. At home, Emma immediately wanted to show David her room, her soccer trophies, and her collection of books about marine life. David listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and remembering details Emma had mentioned, treating her like a person worth knowing, rather than an obstacle to navigate around. "Emma," Sarah called from the kitchen where she was starting dinner. "Come help me set the table." "Can David stay for dinner?" Emma asked, appearing in the doorway. "We're having spaghetti, and Mom makes really good garlic bread." Sarah looked at David, who was standing behind Emma with an expression of hopeful uncertainty. "You don't have to," she said. "I know you probably have work. I'd love to stay if you don't mind the company." "I don't mind the company." Dinner was a revelation. Emma dominated the conversation with stories about school, her friends, and her ongoing campaign to convince Sarah to get a dog. David listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and somehow managed to make Emma laugh until she snorted milk out of her nose, an achievement that immediately earned him Emma's permanent approval. "David," Emma said seriously as they finished eating, "I like you." "I like you too, Emma. You're pretty cool. Are you going to keep being my mom's friend?" David glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like to, if that's okay with you." "It's okay with me, but I have some rules." "I'm listening." Emma held up one finger. "First, you have to be nice to my mom. Like really nice, not fake nice. I can do that." "Second," Emma held up another finger, "you can't try to replace my dad. I already have a dad. I understand I wouldn't try to replace him. Third, if you're going to be around, you have to learn about salmon. It's very important." David's mouth twitched with suppressed laughter. "I will definitely learn about salmon. And fourth," Emma held up her fourth finger, "you have to promise not to break my mom's heart. She's been sad lately, and I don't want her to be sad anymore." The kitchen went quiet. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at Emma's perceptive protectiveness, while David's expression grew tender and serious. "Emma, that's a very important rule, and I promise to do my best to never make your mom sad." David's voice was steady and sincere. "But you know what? The best way for me to keep that promise is if you help me. If you notice I'm doing something that upsets your mom, you should tell me, okay? Because sometimes adults need kids to help them see things clearly." Emma nodded solemnly. "I can do that. I'm very good at noticing things." "I bet you are." Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah and David sat on her couch drinking wine and talking quietly. The living room was still full of boxes, but somehow the chaos felt less overwhelming now, more like the necessary mess of transition than the debris of destruction. "She's incredible," David said. "Smart, funny, protective of you. You're raising an amazing kid, Sarah." "She likes you too," which honestly surprises me. Emma's usually pretty shy with new people. Maybe she senses that I care about her mom. Sarah curled up against David's side, feeling safe and content in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "Do you care about me, I mean?" "Sarah," David's voice was soft but certain, "I'm falling in love with you, with both of you actually. I know it's fast, I know the timing is terrible. I know everything about this situation is complicated, but sometimes the heart knows things the brain hasn't figured out yet. And my heart is pretty sure that you and Emma are what I've been looking for without knowing I was looking." Sarah tilted her head up to look at him. "I'm falling in love with you too, which terrifies me." "Why?" "Because the last time I fell in love, it ended with betrayal and heartbreak and packing boxes. Because I don't trust my judgment about men. Because Emma's happiness depends on my decisions, and I can't afford to be wrong again." David cupped her face gently. "So we don't make the same mistakes twice. We pay attention to red flags. We communicate honestly. We build trust slowly. We let Emma set the pace for how integrated I become in your lives. And if at any point this stops feeling right, we deal with it like adults instead of letting it fester. You make it sound so reasonable. Love should be reasonable, Sarah. Not boring or predictable. but grounded in real compatibility and genuine respect. David kissed her forehead. What we have feels reasonable to me. It feels like something that could last. Sarah thought about Marcus, about how their love had been built on convenience and assumption, rather than genuine partnership. She thought about Christina, about how she'd manipulated David's feelings for personal gain. She thought about all the ways relationships could go wrong when people weren't honest about what they wanted, or who they really were. But she also thought about the way David had spent his afternoon helping her pack without being asked, the way he'd listened to Emma's stories with genuine interest, the way he made her feel like she was someone worth choosing every day, rather than someone who'd been chosen once and now was just being maintained. "I want this to last too," she said quietly. "Yeah? Yeah. But I need time to adjust to being divorced, to figure out our new normal with Emma, to—" David silenced her with a gentle kiss. "Sarah, I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need to adjust. I'll be here. Even if it takes months. Even if it takes years." Sarah smiled against his lips. "I don't think it'll take years." "Good. Because while I'm willing to wait as long as you need, I'm also looking forward to the day when I don't have to go home to my empty condo every night." "Where do you live?" "Pearl District, 20th floor of a building with excellent views and absolutely no personality." David's tone was wry. "I bought it because it was a good investment, but it's never felt like home." "What would feel like home?" David looked around Sarah's cluttered, half-packed living room, at the evidence of real life being lived. Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, soccer cleats by the door, the cozy chaos of a house where people actually lived, rather than just resided. "This," he said simply. "Someday, when you're ready, something like this." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the empty living room of her new apartment, watching David direct the movers with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing complex projects. Emma was at school, blissfully unaware that today was moving day, and Sarah felt equal parts exhausted and exhilarated as she watched her old life transform into her new one. "Where do you want the couch?" asked Jake, the lead mover. "Against that wall." Sarah pointed, then looked at David. "Does that make sense with the TV placement?" "Perfect. It'll give Emma room to practice her soccer moves without kicking anything important." Sarah smiled. Over the past 3 weeks, David had somehow managed to be present for every major decision and helpful with every logistical challenge, without ever making her feel like he was taking over. He'd helped her find this apartment, a sunny 2-bedroom in southeast Portland that was affordable, close to Emma's school, and had a small backyard perfect for a garden. He'd connected her with reliable movers, helped her coordinate utilities, and even convinced his contractor friend to install new locks and update the bathroom fixtures at cost. But more than the practical help, he'd been emotionally supportive as Sarah navigated the complicated feelings of ending her marriage and starting over. He'd listened when she cried about feeling like she was failing Emma, celebrated when she got angry at Marcus instead of sad, and held her when the enormity of single parenthood felt overwhelming. "Last box," called Marcus from the doorway, carrying a container labeled Emma's winter clothes in Sarah's careful handwriting. The interactions between Marcus and David had been professionally cordial, 2 men who both cared about Emma's well-being and were mature enough to put aside personal awkwardness for her sake. Marcus had been genuinely surprised by David's presence in their lives, but after seeing how Emma had taken to him, he'd accepted the reality with something approaching grace. "Thanks," Sarah said, taking the box. "I think that's everything." Marcus looked around the empty house where they'd lived together for 5 years, his expression unreadable. "It looks smaller without all our stuff." "It does." "Sarah," Marcus started, then stopped, glancing at David, who was giving them privacy by examining the mover's paperwork. "I know I don't have the right to say this, but be careful, okay? Emma's already been through enough changes." Sarah felt a flare of irritation. "I'm being very careful, Marcus. David's been part of our lives for almost a month, and Emma adores him. He's not going anywhere." "How can you be sure?" "The same way I was sure about you. Except this time I'm paying attention to actions instead of just words. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. David shows up when he says he will. He remembers what Emma tells him about school. He helps with practical things without being asked. He's present, Marcus, really present. Marcus looked hurt but nodded slowly. He seems like a good guy. He is. And he makes you happy? Sarah glanced over at David, who was making Emma laugh over FaceTime while showing her pictures of their new apartment. He makes me feel like myself again, like someone worth loving. Marcus's expression crumpled slightly. Sarah, I never meant to make you feel. I know you didn't mean to, but intentions don't erase impact. Sarah's voice softened with old fondness. We both know we weren't right for each other, Marcus. We were comfortable, familiar, safe, but we weren't really in love, not the way we should have been. No, we weren't. Marcus looked at David again, watching him patiently answer Emma's excited questions about when she could see her new room. He's good with her. He is. Emma feels safe with him, and that matters more to me than anything else. Marcus nodded and headed toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I hope he makes you happier than I ever could. Thank you, Sarah said, meaning it. I hope you're happy too, Marcus, really. After Marcus left, David approached carefully. You okay? Yeah, I am. It feels weird to be officially divorced, officially moved out, officially starting over, but good weird. Sarah looked around the empty house one more time. Ready to go see our new place? Our new place? David's eyebrows rose. Sarah blushed. I mean my new place. Emma's and my new place, where you'll be spending a lot of time if we're lucky. David wrapped his arms around her waist. I like the sound of our new place, even if it's premature and presumptuous and probably moving too fast. Everything about us has moved too fast. Why stop now? Good point. David kissed her gently, though I should mention that I may have done something slightly presumptuous. What? I may have asked the contractors to install a few extra shelves in Emma's closet and to add some hooks by the back door for soccer equipment. Sarah stared at him. You customized my daughter's room. Is that bad? I can have them change it back if... Sarah silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect, you're perfect. This whole impossible, impractical, too-fast situation is perfect. Even though we met barely a month ago in a dive bar while we were both drinking our sorrows away. Especially because of that. Sarah grinned. I love our story, David. It's messy and complicated and real, and it's ours. 2 hours later, Emma exploded through the door of their new apartment with the enthusiasm of a small tornado. David having picked her up from school while Sarah handled the final moving details. Mom, did you see the backyard? David showed me on his phone, and there's space for a garden and maybe a swing set, and he said we could plant sunflowers because they grow really tall and... Breathe, Em. Sarah laughed, catching her daughter in a hug. Yes, I saw the backyard. What do you think of your new room? Emma raced down the hallway, her excited squeals echoing through the apartment as she discovered the built-in shelves, the reading nook by the window, and the hooks David had installed for her backpack and jacket. It's perfect, Emma called out. Can David help me set up my bookshelf? If he wants to, Sarah replied, watching David's face light up with pleasure. I'd love to, David called back. As Emma and David got to work organizing her room, Sarah stood in her new living room, surrounded by boxes but feeling more at home than she had in years. Through the window, she could see the neighborhood where Emma would grow up, the trees that would change with the seasons, the community they would build together. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. How's the new place, need help unpacking? Sarah typed back, perfect and no thanks. I've got all the help I need. Another text, this one from her best friend from work. Still can't believe you're dating someone you met in a bar. That never works out. Sarah smiled as she replied, sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. From Emma's room came the sound of laughter and animated discussion about the proper organization system for books about marine life. Sarah followed the voices and found David sitting cross-legged on Emma's floor, listening with complete attention as Emma explained the difference between Atlantic and Pacific salmon migration patterns. And that's why it's so important to keep the rivers clean, Emma concluded seriously. That makes perfect sense, David replied. I'm going to remember that when I'm designing the salmon playground. Maybe we can include some educational signs about river conservation. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? We could teach other kids about salmon? Absolutely. In fact, I was thinking, would you like to come see the construction site sometime? I could show you how we're building the playground, and you could give me more consulting advice. Emma looked at Sarah with pleading eyes. Mom, can I? Please. Sarah looked at David, who was clearly enjoying Emma's excitement as much as Emma was enjoying his attention. If David has time and it's safe for you to be there, then yes, it's very safe, David assured her. Hard hats, safety vests, and a tour guide who knows all the best spots to see salmon during spawning season. This is the best day ever, Emma declared, throwing her arms around David in an impulsive hug that made him close his eyes with emotion. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep in her new room, Sarah and David sat on the couch in her living room, sharing a bottle of wine and planning where to hang pictures on the walls. I have something to tell you, David said, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. Good something or bad something? Good something, I think. I hope. David took her hand. I got a call from my real estate agent today. Someone made an offer on my condo. Oh, Sarah tried to process this information. Are you going to accept it? That depends. On what? On whether you think there might be room in your life for a roommate sometime in the next few months. David's voice was carefully casual, but Sarah could hear the underlying nervousness. Not immediately, not until you and Emma are settled and you're ready for that step, but eventually. Sarah stared at him. You want to move in with us? I want to build a life with you, with both of you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to help Emma with her homework. I want to plant a garden in our backyard and cook dinner in our kitchen and fall asleep every night knowing that this is home. David's voice grew more confident as he spoke. I know it's fast. I know it's a big step, but Sarah, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sarah's heart was pounding. What about your company, your lifestyle? The fact that I come with a 7-year-old and an ex-husband and approximately zero money to contribute to a mortgage? My company can be run from anywhere. My lifestyle was lonely and meaningless before you, and Emma is the best part of this whole package. David shifted to face her fully. As for money, Sarah, I don't want your money. I don't need your money. What I need is your love, your partnership, your willingness to build something real together. And if I can't offer that, if I'm too damaged from my marriage, too scared of getting hurt again, too protective of Emma to ever fully let you in, then I wait until you can, or I love you and Emma from whatever distance you're comfortable with for as long as you'll let me. David's voice was steady and sure. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. No, I think you're braver than you realize, stronger than you know, and ready for the kind of love you actually deserve. David cupped her face in his hands. I think we found each other at exactly the right time, in exactly the right way, for exactly the right reasons. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but love and certainty and hope for their future together. You really want this? The chaos and complexity and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and all of it? Sarah, I don't just want it. I choose it. I choose you. I choose Emma. I choose the beautiful mess of real life with real people who matter to each other. David's voice grew soft. I choose us. Sarah felt tears spill over as she kissed him, pouring all her love and hope and gratitude into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's do it. Let's build a life together. Let's see what happens when two people who've been hurt decide to trust each other completely. Sarah smiled through her tears. Let's choose us. David's answering smile was radiant with joy and relief. Yeah, but I have conditions. I'm listening. First, we tell Emma together. And we make sure she's comfortable with the idea before we make it official. Agreed. Second, we keep some of your condo money in a separate account that's just for Emma. College fund, emergency fund, whatever she needs. Done. Third, you have to promise me that if this doesn't work out, we'll handle it like adults. No disappearing, no cutting Emma out of your life, no making her feel like it was her fault. David's expression grew serious. Sarah, it's going to work out. Promise me anyway. I promise. But I also promise that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we never need to test that agreement. Good. Sarah settled against his side, feeling peaceful and hopeful and absolutely certain for the first time in longer than she could remember. So when do we tell Emma that you're moving in? How about tomorrow, after she's had time to adjust to the new apartment? Perfect. Sarah looked around their living room, imagining it filled with David's furniture mixed with theirs, his books on the shelves next to Emma's, his coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet beside hers. This is really happening, isn't it? It's really happening. I love you, David Kim. I love you too, Sarah Chen. Both of you. Outside, Portland continued its quiet October evening, the city lights twinkling beyond their windows, the future spreading out before them full of possibility and promise. Inside, Sarah curled up against the man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment when she needed to remember what it felt like to be truly chosen, truly valued, truly loved. 6 months later, on a sunny April morning, Sarah woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Emma's laughter drifting from the kitchen. She stretched luxuriously in the bed she now shared with David, smiling at the evidence of their life together scattered around the room. His watch on the nightstand next to her jewelry, his suit jacket draped over the chair where she'd thrown her cardigan the night before, the framed photo on the dresser showing all three of them at Emma's soccer game. "Mom!" Emma's voice called from the kitchen. "David made pancakes shaped like salmon." "I'll be right there," Sarah called back, pulling on her robe and padding barefoot down the hallway. In the kitchen, she found David standing at the stove, his hair still messy from sleep, wearing the world's best soccer dad t-shirt Emma had given him for Christmas. Emma sat at the counter, drizzling syrup over what was indeed a pancake shaped remarkably like a salmon, chattering excitedly about her upcoming science fair project. "Good morning, beautiful," David said, kissing Sarah's temple as she wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "Good morning. You're up early for a Saturday." Emma convinced me that salmon pancakes were essential for proper science fair preparation. Sarah looked at her daughter, who was explaining to David the intricacies of salmon spawning behavior with the authority of a marine biologist, and felt her heart swell with gratitude for the life they'd built together. David had seamlessly integrated into their routines, becoming not just Sarah's partner, but Emma's champion, advocate, and friend. "How's the project coming along, Em?" Sarah asked, pouring herself coffee from the pot David had already made. "Really good. David helped me design a model of the salmon life cycle, and we're going to use LED lights to show how the fish navigate by the stars." Emma's excitement was infectious. "And guess what? The salmon playground is almost finished, and David says we can have my birthday party there next month." Sarah's eyes widened. "Really? It's ready?" "Final inspections are this week," David confirmed. "And yes, it's perfect for birthday parties. There's even a picnic area with tables." "Can we invite my whole class?" Emma asked hopefully. "We'll see," Sarah said automatically, though she was already mentally planning the party. The salmon playground had become something of a neighborhood legend, with kids and parents eagerly anticipating its opening. "Actually," David said, his tone carefully casual, "I was thinking Emma's birthday might be a good time for another kind of celebration too." Sarah looked at him curiously. "What kind of celebration?" Instead of answering, David reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught as he dropped to one knee right there in their kitchen, with Emma bouncing excitedly in her chair and salmon-shaped pancakes cooling on the counter. "Sarah Chen," David said, his voice steady and sure despite the obvious emotion in his eyes. "6 months ago, I thought my life was about building buildings and making money and trying to prove I was worth something.